The world had always seen Barron Trump as the quiet, reserved son of the most controversial and talked about figure in modern American politics, Donald J. Trump. Unlike his older siblings, who actively participated in the political limelight, Barron had mostly stayed out of public view, making rare appearances alongside his father. The media had often speculated about him, labeling him everything from the mysterious Trump to the enigma of the White House. But on a crisp September evening, that all changed. The White House press secretary had sent out an unexpected announcement. Barron Trump would be delivering a keynote speech at the Conservative American Values Summit, an event known for attracting world leaders, business moguls, and millions of American patriots. The news sent shockwaves across the country. Why now? What could the young Trump have to say? Speculations ran wild. Some believed this was a carefully crafted move by the Trump administration to introduce Barron as the next generation of the Trump dynasty. Others thought it was a desperate attempt to soften Donald Trump's often brash and polarizing public image. But the truth was far more extraordinary than anyone could have predicted. The event was scheduled to take place at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in California. Every major news network prepared for live coverage, and social media exploded with anticipation. Was Barron going to endorse his father in a way no one had before? Would he reveal untold truths about the man who had led America twice as its president? Or was this simply a public relations stunt? Inside the White House, Barron was calm. He had been preparing for this moment for months, carefully crafting a speech that would not only honor his father but shake the very foundations of how the world saw him. His mother, Melania Trump, had always advised him to speak with authenticity, and he took that advice to heart. The night before the speech, Barron sat in his room, going over his words. His father, President Donald Trump, walked in, an unusual expression on his face. "You sure about this, kid?" he asked, his voice gruff but laced with a rare softness. Barron looked up and met his father's gaze. "Yes, Dad. It's time people see you the way I do." Trump smirked, nodding. "Then give him hell." With that, Barron knew tomorrow would be a turning point in history. The day of Barron Trump's speech arrived, and the nation stood still. Networks across America had cleared their primetime slots to broadcast the event live, while millions of people tuned in worldwide. The Ronald Reagan Presidential Library was filled with prominent figures, senators, congressmen, journalists, business tycoons, and even a few foreign dignitaries. The energy in the room was electric. As Barron stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. He was no longer the quiet boy the world had barely seen. He was a towering presence, standing over 6 feet 7 inches, carrying himself with a composed yet commanding aura. Dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, his striking resemblance to his father was undeniable. Yet, there was something distinctly different about him. His demeanor, his grace, and the way he looked at the crowd with quiet confidence. The applause gradually died down, and an almost eerie silence fell over the room. The cameras zoomed in, capturing his every move. Then, with a deep breath, Barron Trump began to speak. "For as long as I can remember, my father has been the most talked about man in the world. People have called him a genius, a patriot, a leader, but also a liar, a tyrant, and everything in between. The media has painted him as a villain, a savior, a disruptor, and a force of nature. But the world has only ever known Donald Trump, the brand. Today, I want to introduce you to Donald Trump, the man." The audience leaned forward, intrigued. Even the most seasoned political analysts were taken aback by his poise. This wasn't just a speech, it was a revelation in the making. Growing up in the Trump family was unlike anything most people could imagine. "I've seen my father at his highest and his lowest. I've seen him win battles no one thought he could, and I've seen him take hits that would have destroyed lesser men. But there's one thing the world has never truly understood about my father. It's not power that drives him. It's not fame, it's not money. It's something far simpler, yet far more powerful than anyone realizes." A pause. The room was dead silent. Even the most critical journalists weren't typing. No one wanted to miss a word. "My father is a fighter, not because he enjoys the fight, but because he believes in something greater than himself. He believes in America, He believes in its people. And he believes that no matter how much they try to break him, no matter how many times they count him out, he will stand back up. Again and again and again. A murmur ran through the audience. This was not what they had expected. I've watched him wake up every morning knowing that the entire world was against him. I've seen him read headlines that declared him finished, that mocked him, that called him everything but a human being. And do you know what he did? He smiled. He laughed. He told me, Barron, they can say whatever they want. But as long as you know who you are, nothing else matters. The crowd remained spellbound. Some of Trump's fiercest critics in the room shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My father taught me that greatness isn't about what the world says. It's about what you do. It's about standing for what's right, even when it's not popular. It's about believing in something so much that you're willing to take every punch, every insult, every betrayal, and still stand tall. Barron's voice was growing stronger, more resolute. His words weren't just being heard, they were felt. People have asked me why I chose to speak today. The answer is simple. Because I refuse to let history write a false story about a man I know better than anyone else. My father isn't perfect, no man is, but he is real. And in a world that is full of deception, manipulation, and weakness, being real is the rarest and most powerful thing a person can be. A ripple of applause began in the crowd. It was small at first but grew rapidly as people rose to their feet, clapping. Barron didn't acknowledge it, he wasn't finished yet. The media calls my father divisive. But let me ask you this, doesn't division happen when people refuse to listen? When they refuse to see beyond the headlines and seek the truth for themselves? If we truly want unity, then it's time to have an honest conversation. Not just about my father, but about what America truly stands for. The applause was deafening now. Some members of the audience had tears in their eyes. Barron had done what no one thought possible. He had made even his father's greatest critics stop and reconsider. And he was just getting started. As the applause roared through the grand hall of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, Barron Trump remained still, his hands gripping the podium. He wasn't there to bask in admiration. He had a message to deliver, and he wasn't done yet. When the applause finally died down, he leaned slightly forward, locking eyes with the crowd. Let me tell you a story about my father that you won't find in any headline, that no journalist will ever write about, and that no politician will ever admit. The room fell silent again. Everyone was hanging on to his words. In 2016, when my father won the presidency, the world erupted, half in celebration, half in outrage. But do you know what my father did that night, after all the cameras were off and the victory speeches were over? He sat down, completely exhausted, and looked at my mother and me. And do you know what he said? He said, "This isn't about me. It never was. It's about them. The people who finally feel like they have a voice." A few gasps were heard in the audience. Even his most vocal opponents had to admit, this wasn't the Donald Trump they had expected to hear about. That's the part they never tell you. They show you the tweets, the speeches, the rallies. But they don't show you the late nights where he sits in silence, thinking about the struggles of the everyday American. They don't show you the times he's looked me in the eye and said, "Barron, no matter how much they hate me, I have to keep fighting. Because if I don't, who will?" A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience. Some nodded, others sat frozen. Barron's words weren't just powerful, they were challenging. People say my father is arrogant. They say he's a showman. They say he only cares about himself. But I have seen a different man. I have seen a father who taught me that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every single time. I have seen a man who, despite being the most powerful person in the world, never forgot where he came from. A man who, despite all the attacks, all the betrayals, still wakes up every morning with the same question in his mind. What can I do for America today? The audience was spellbound. Some clapped, some wiped their eyes, others simply sat there, stunned. Barron took a deep breath. His voice softened, but his conviction remained strong. I am not here to tell you how to vote. I am not here to convince you to love my father. I am here for one reason, to challenge you to think. To stop believing the versions of people that the media feeds you. To stop letting others tell you what to believe and to see for yourself. He paused, scanning the room. Because if we can't even do that, if we can't listen, if we can't question, if we can't look beyond our own biases, then we don't just lose a president. We lose our country. Silence. Then, slowly at first, someone in the back stood up. Then another. And another. Within moments, the entire hall was on its feet, giving Barron a standing ovation unlike any seen before. It wasn't just Republicans. It wasn't just Trump supporters. It was Americans, people who, for the first time in years, felt something they had long forgotten. Hope. As Barron stepped away from the podium, cameras zoomed in on his father, sitting in the front row. Donald Trump, a man rarely seen without his signature confidence, looked at his son with an expression few had ever witnessed. Pride, mixed with something else. Perhaps, for the first time in his life, even Donald Trump himself was shocked. And the world would never be the same again. As Barron Trump stepped down from the podium, the energy in the room was unlike anything seen in modern American politics. The standing ovation continued for what felt like an eternity. Some in the audience clapped with admiration, others with sheer disbelief. The speech had shaken the very foundation of public perception, not just of Donald Trump, but of Barron himself. The cameras immediately cut to major newsrooms across the country. Commentators, many of whom had built their careers on opposing Trump, were at a loss for words. CNN's Anderson Cooper finally spoke after a long pause. I don't know what to say. This wasn't the speech of a privileged son defending his father. This was something different. Over at Fox News, Sean Hannity was practically beaming. Ladies and gentlemen, we just witnessed history. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. Barron Trump just changed the game. Social media exploded. Barron Trump's speech became the #1 trending hashtag on, formerly Twitter, surpassing even major global events. Clips of his speech were being replayed across every platform, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, garnering millions of views in mere hours. But the most unexpected reactions came from some of Donald Trump's most vocal critics. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow, who had spent years criticizing the Trump administration, looked visibly unsettled. Look, I have spent my career calling out Trump for his policies and rhetoric, and I stand by that. But I have to be honest, Barron's speech tonight wasn't just powerful. It was unsettling in the way that it made me question whether we have underestimated Donald Trump as a person. And I never thought I'd say that. Across the country, living rooms were filled with discussions, debates, and disbelief. Many had tuned in expecting a scripted, politically safe speech, but what they got was something raw, emotional, and profoundly personal. Even those who despised Trump found themselves questioning their perceptions. Back at the White House, Donald Trump sat in the private residence with his family. Melania, always composed, looked at her son with deep admiration. Ivanka and Eric had their eyes glued to the TV, watching the world react in real time. Trump, never one to be speechless, finally turned to Barron. Kid, you just did something no one, no pollster, no strategist, no campaign manager, could ever do. You made people feel something. Barron smiled slightly but remained humble. I just told the truth. Trump smirked. Yeah, well, the truth just set this election on fire. Melania placed a hand on Barron's shoulder. You were brilliant, Barron, and you did it your way. The night was only just beginning. Meanwhile, on the streets of America, something remarkable was happening. At coffee shops, at bars, at college campuses, people who had been bitterly divided for years were having real conversations. I still don't like Trump, one young progressive admitted to his friend. But I gotta say, Barron made me see him in a different light. Same, his friend replied. It's weird. I came in expecting to roll my eyes, but I actually felt something when he spoke. On the other end of the spectrum, lifelong Trump supporters were feeling more fired up than ever. This just proved what we've been saying all along. The media never gave Trump a fair shake, a middle-aged truck driver in Texas said to a news reporter. His own son just exposed the truth. The speech had done something rare in modern American politics. It had cut through the noise. It wasn't just about Trump anymore. It was about America. As dawn broke over Washington, D.C., the world was still reeling from Barron Trump's speech. The news cycle had yet to move on, something unheard of in today's fast-paced media environment. It wasn't just political pundits discussing it. Ordinary Americans, international leaders, and cultural influencers all had something to say. The New York Times ran the headline, "Barron Trump's speech, the moment that changed everything?" The Wall Street Journal analyzed the economic and political impact, calling it a political masterstroke, intentional or not. Even traditionally left-leaning outlets like the Washington Post admitted, love or hate Trump, his son just delivered the most honest speech in years. Polling data from overnight showed a dramatic shift. While Trump had always maintained a strong Republican base, independent voters, particularly younger Americans, showed a 15-point favorability increase toward him after Barron's speech. Even some Democrats, disillusioned with the status quo, admitted to reassessing their views. But perhaps the most surprising reaction came from an unexpected source. In a private moment inside the White House, Donald Trump sat in the Oval Office, his phone buzzing with calls from world leaders, party strategists, and media personalities. But one name on the caller ID made him raise an eyebrow. He answered, "Mr. President." The voice on the other end said, "I never thought I'd be saying this, but your son, he did something incredible." It was Barack Obama. For a moment, Trump was silent. Then he chuckled. "Well, Barack, never thought I'd hear you say that." "Look," Obama continued, "we've had our differences, big ones, but I watched that speech last night, and for the first time in years, I saw something that America has been missing, real leadership, not just from a politician, but from a young man who isn't afraid to speak from the heart." Trump leaned back in his chair. "So what are you saying, Barack? You gonna start Hope and Change 2.0 with Barron?" He joked. Obama laughed but then turned serious. "I'm saying that no matter what happens in the next election, you need to listen to that kid. He sees things clearly. And if you're smart, you'll recognize what you have in him." Trump looked out the window, the Washington Monument standing tall in the distance. "Oh, don't worry, Barack. I do." As speculation ran wild, reporters hounded Barron Trump, asking if he had political aspirations of his own. Some dubbed him the Trump who could unite America. Others whispered that he might be a future presidential contender. At a surprise press conference, Barron finally addressed the nation once more. "I'm honored that so many people found meaning in my words. But let me be clear, I'm not here to be a politician. I'm here to remind America that no matter what side you're on, truth matters, character matters, and standing up for what you believe in matters." A journalist shouted, "Will you run for office someday?" Barron smiled. "I don't have those plans right now, but I do believe in something my father always said, never say never." The crowd erupted in cheers. That night, Donald Trump and Barron stood on the White House balcony, looking over the glowing city. "You did good, kid," Trump said, his voice softer than usual. "I just spoke from the heart," Barron replied. Trump smirked. "Yeah, well, sometimes that's the most dangerous thing you can do." As America debated, argued, and analyzed every word of his speech, one thing became clear. This was not the last the world would hear from Barron Trump. And for the first time in years, something new was in the air.